My life split into two halves the night my blood hit the kitchen tiles. Dad was 1,000 miles away, and my stepmother stood over me, screaming lies while her daughter filmed my humiliation. With a slashed palm and a cheap duffel bag, I was shoved out the front door before midnight. Standing alone in the dark, I realized I had not just lost a family, I had become my own emergency exit. My name is Erica Swanson. If I had to pinpoint the exact second my life fractured into two distinct timelines, it was not when the company downsized me, and it was not even when my father drove away to North Dakota. It was the moment a singular drop of my own blood hit the beige linoleum of my father's kitchen floor. There is a specific sound a heavy glass makes when it shatters against a countertop, a sharp, violent crunch that echoes in your teeth. That sound was the punctuation mark at the end of my childhood. Let me set the scene for you because context is the only thing that separates a tragedy from a misunderstanding. We were living in Maple Ridge, Ohio, a town that prides itself on manicured lawns and neighbors who know exactly when your garbage cans go out but pretend not to hear when you are screaming. I was 27 years old. I know what you are thinking. Why was a 27-year-old woman living with her father and stepmother? The economy is the short answer. I had been working as a junior logistics coordinator until a merger made my department redundant. I had savings, but not enough to weather a long storm, so I swallowed my pride and moved back into the guest room of the house I grew up in. It was supposed to be temporary, 3 months, maybe 4, just until I got back on my feet. But then Dad got the contract. He works in industrial maintenance, the kind of job that breaks your back but pays for the nice siding on the house. He was sent to a long-term site in North Dakota, 1,200 miles away. He sat me down before he left, his hands rough and calloused, and told me to look after Lana and Brielle. He told me to be the peacekeeper. He had no idea he was leaving me in a cage with 2 tigers who had just realized the zookeeper was gone. The atmosphere in the house curdled the moment his truck taillights vanished around the corner. Lana Calder, my stepmother, is a woman who has turned passive aggression into an Olympic sport. She is beautiful in a sharp, preserved way, the kind of woman who wears full makeup to check the mailbox. Then there is her daughter, Brielle. Brielle was 19 then, a sophomore in college who somehow never seemed to attend classes but always had new clothes. It was a Tuesday night. The house was silent, wrapped in that suffocating quiet that only exists in the suburbs after 10 in the evening. I was sitting at the kitchen island, the granite cold against my forearms. The only light came from the under-cabinet LEDs, casting long, sterile shadows across the room. In front of me lay a stack of envelopes I had fished out of the recycling bin earlier that afternoon. Lana had thrown them away unopened. One of them was a final notice from the electric company. I had spent the last hour staring at the red ink. We were 48 hours away from a disconnection. I knew Dad sent money. He sent plenty of money. He transferred $3,000 specifically for household expenses on the first of every month. I knew this because he told me to remind Lana to check the deposit. Yet, here I was, looking at a bill that had not been paid in 3 months. I opened my banking app on my phone. My severance package was dwindling. I had less than $2,000 to my name, meant for a deposit on a new apartment and gas for interviews. I hesitated, my thumb hovering over the transfer button. I could let the power go out. It would teach Lana a lesson. But then I thought about the food in the freezer, the humiliation of the neighbors seeing the utility truck, and the inevitable phone call to Dad, where Lana would somehow twist it to make it my fault. I sighed, a sound that seemed too loud in the empty kitchen, and paid the bill, $240.56, gone. I was just closing the browser tab when the click of heels on the hardwood floor made me stiffen. Lana walked in. She was wearing a silk robe that cost more than my first car, a glass of Chardonnay in one hand. She smiled when she saw me, but it did not reach her eyes. It never did. "You are up late, Erica," she said, her voice smooth, like syrup poured over broken glass. "Hunting for snacks?" "Paying the electric bill," I said, keeping my voice steady. I pushed the paper across the granite toward her. "They were going to cut us off on Thursday. Lana, you threw the notice in the trash." Lana did not even glance at the paper. She took a sip of her wine, her eyes fixing on my laptop screen. The air in the kitchen shifted. The temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees. "Who gave you permission to go through my mail?" she asked. The sweetness was evaporating, replaced by a cold, hard edge. "It is addressed to Dad," I replied. "And I did not go through your mail. I found it in the recycling bin under a pile of catalogs. Along with this." I reached into my folder and pulled out the second piece of evidence. It was a printout I had found tucked into one of her discarded shopping bags. It was a receipt from a luxury boutique in Columbus, dated 3 days ago, a handbag, $1,500, charged to the joint account, the same account that was currently overdrawn, causing the utility checks to bounce. "Dad thinks that money is going to the mortgage and the bills," I said, my heart hammering against my ribs. "He is working double shifts in the freezing cold in North Dakota, and you are buying handbags while the lights are about to be cut." Lana set her wine glass down. She moved around the island, her movements slow, predatory. She stopped inches from me. I could smell her expensive perfume, a cloying scent of jasmine and musk. "You think you are so smart, do you not?" she whispered. "Little Miss College graduate, Little Miss Analyst." "I am going to tell him, Lana," I said, standing up. I was shaking, but I refused to back down. "I am going to send him these receipts. He deserves to know." Lana laughed. It was a dry, brittle sound. "Go ahead. Send them. Who do you think he will believe? The wife who keeps his home warm, or the failure of a daughter who had to crawl back into his spare room because she could not hold down a job?" "I did not lose my job because of incompetence," I snapped. "I was laid off." "You are a burden, Erica," she spat. "You have always been a burden. Your mother died and left you to weigh him down, and now you are trying to ruin the one good thing he has found since—" That hit me like a physical blow. She knew exactly where to aim. My mother was a saint, and Lana was not fit to speak her name. "Do not talk about my mother," I warned, my voice trembling. "I will talk about whatever I want in my house," Lana hissed. Her face was contorted now, the mask completely gone. She looked ugly, twisted by greed and malice. "And this is my house, not yours. You are just a guest that has overstayed her welcome." "It is Dad's house," I countered, "and I paid the electricity that is keeping your wine cold right now." "You insolent little brat." The slap came out of nowhere. It was fast, professional, practiced. Her palm connected with my left cheek with a cracking sound that filled the room. The force of it staggered me. I stumbled back, my hip catching the edge of the counter. My hand flailed out to steady myself, sweeping across the surface. My fingers caught the stem of her wine glass. It tipped, rolled, and shattered against the edge of the granite island before crashing to the floor. I lost my footing on the slick hardwood and went down, my knees hitting the tiles hard. My right hand shot out to break my fall, and it landed directly in the pile of jagged shards. I gasped, a wet, sharp intake of air. I pulled my hand back, and for a second, it just looked wet. Then the blood welled up, dark and fast, dripping from the meat of my palm onto the beige tile. "Look what you did!" Lana shrieked. She was not looking at my hand. She was looking at the wine stain on the cabinet. "You clumsy, violent freak!" I clutched my wrist, staring at the blood. It was pulsing. I needed a towel. I needed help. "Lana," I said, my voice small. "I am bleeding." "Good," she yelled. Then I saw the movement in the doorway. Brielle was standing there. She was wearing oversized pajamas, her phone held high in landscape mode. The red recording indicator was on. She was not rushing to get the first aid kit. She was not calling for help. She was framing the shot. "Did you get it?" Lana asked, her voice suddenly dropping the screech and becoming calm, almost businesslike. Brielle smirked. It was a terrifying expression on a 19-year-old face. "Started recording right when she threw the glass at you. Mom, I got her screaming at you, too." I froze. The pain in my hand throbbed in time with my heartbeat, but my mind went ice cold. "What?" I whispered. I did not throw. I have it all on video, Brielle said, her voice tailored for the microphone, feigning fear. Oh my God, Erica, please stop hurting her. Why are you so crazy? Stop it, I said, struggling to stand. The blood was dripping faster now, creating a small pool near my sneaker. Stop filming, Lana. Tell her to stop. Lana stepped back, clutching her chest in a pantomime of terror. Stay back. Do not come near me. You are unstable. Lana, stop acting, I pleaded. I just paid the bill. I just wanted you to see. She is attacking me, Lana screamed, turning toward the hallway as if speaking to an invisible audience. She is out of control. She threw a glass at my head. She turned back to me, her eyes hard as flint. Get out. What? I asked, confused. Get out of my house, Lana commanded. Right now, before I call the police and show them this video, assault with a weapon, domestic violence, that is a felony. Erica, do you know how hard it is to get a logistics job with a violent felony on your record? My stomach turned over. I looked at Brielle. She was still filming, nodding encouragingly at her mother. They had done this before, maybe not to this extreme, but they knew the rhythm of it. They controlled the narrative. I was the angry, unemployed stepdaughter. Lana was the terrified wife. You cannot kick me out, I said. It is midnight. Dad. Your father is not here, Lana hissed, leaning in close. And by the time he hears about this, he will see the video of you smashing glass and screaming at his wife. He will be so disappointed in you, again. She grabbed a bag from the pantry closet. It was an old promotional gym duffel bag from a car dealership, dusty and smelling of stale rubber. She threw it at me. It hit my chest and fell to the floor, landing in the glass and wine. Pack your trash, Lana said. You have 10 minutes. If you are not on the other side of that door in 10 minutes, I am dialing 911, and Brielle will show them exactly what you did. I looked at my hand. I looked at the two women standing in the kitchen that my mother had designed. I realized then that I could not win this argument. Logic does not work on predators. Truth does not matter when the camera is pointed the wrong way. If the police came, I would be the one bleeding, shouting, and looking frantic. Lana would be the weeping victim. I scrambled to my feet, clutching the duffel bag with my good hand. I ran to the guest room. I did not fold my clothes. I grabbed handfuls of whatever was in the drawers, underwear, t-shirts, my spare jeans, and shoved them into the bag. I grabbed my laptop, my charger, my toothbrush. I wrapped a hand towel around my bleeding palm and secured it with a hair tie. It was crude, but it would have to do. 9 minutes later, I was walking through the living room. Lana stood by the front door, holding it open. She looked triumphant. Do not come back, she said quietly, and do not bother calling Robert. I will handle the explanation. You are stealing from him, I said, my voice shaking with a mix of rage and grief. He will find out. He will find out that his daughter had a mental breakdown and attacked his wife, Lana corrected. Now get out. She shoved me. I stumbled over the threshold and onto the concrete porch. The door slammed shut behind me. I heard the deadbolt slide home, then the chain, then the click of the lock on the knob. Silence rushed back in. I stood there for a moment, staring at the wood grain of the door. It was freezing. The Ohio night air cut through my thin hoodie. I turned around and looked out at the street. The streetlights hummed, casting pools of sickly yellow light on the asphalt. My car was parked on the street because Lana needed the garage for her projects. I walked down the steps, my legs feeling like lead. I reached into my pocket for my car keys. They were not there. I patted my other pocket, empty. I froze. My keys were on the hook by the refrigerator, inside the house. I turned back to the house. I could see Brielle in the window, the curtains twitching. She was watching. If I pounded on the door, she would record that too. Look, she's trying to break back in. I checked my phone. 7% battery. I had no car keys. I had a bleeding hand wrapped in a ruined towel. I had a duffel bag full of wrinkled clothes. I had less than $40 cash in my wallet, and my bank account was lighter by $200 because I had tried to be a good daughter. I walked to the edge of the driveway and sat on the curb, the damp cold seeping instantly through my jeans. I looked up and down the empty street. It looked different now. An hour ago, it was my neighborhood. Now, it was a landscape of closed doors and darkened windows. I realized then that I was entirely alone. The safety net I thought I had, my father's house, his protection, was an illusion. It had been shredded by a lie and a camera phone. I pulled my phone out. 6%. I needed to call someone. But who? Dad wouldn't answer. He was on the night shift, and even if he did, Lana had already poisoned the well. My friends from college were scattered across the state. I scrolled through my contacts, my thumb leaving a smear of blood on the screen. I stopped at a name I had not texted in 3 days because I was too proud to admit how bad things had gotten. Luca. I stared at the name, Luca Hale. We had been dating for 6 months. He was sweet, kind, and studying architecture. He had no idea about the war zone I lived in. I kept that part of my life sealed off, ashamed of the dysfunction. Calling him felt like admitting defeat. It felt like dragging him into the mud with me. But the blood was soaking through the towel, and the cold was making my teeth chatter. I typed with my shaking thumb. Lana kicked me out. I am on the curb. I do not have my keys. I do not know where to go. I hit send. I watched the little progress bar. It hung there for a second, mocking me, before the word delivered appeared. Then my screen went black. The battery symbol flashed once, an empty red rectangle, and died. I put the phone in my pocket and pulled the duffel bag closer to my chest, trying to preserve body warmth. I looked at the dark street one last time. That night, sitting on the cold concrete of Maple Ridge, I realized something profound. The family I was born into was gone. My mother was dead. My father was a ghost haunting a construction site in another state. And the people inside that house were not family. They were parasites. I shivered, closing my eyes. I did not know it yet, but I was not just waiting for a ride. I was waiting for the rest of my life to pull up to the curb. I had lost my home. Yes, but in the silence of that street, forced out of the warmth I had tried so hard to buy, I became my own emergency exit, and I promised myself, right there in the dark, that if I survived this night, I would never, ever let anyone hold the keys to my life again. To understand how I ended up bleeding on the kitchen floor while my stepmother checked her manicure, you have to rewind the tape. You have to go back to when I was 14 years old. That was the year the color drained out of my world. My mother died of ovarian cancer in the spring, leaving my father and me in a house that suddenly felt too big and too quiet. We were not rich. We were barely middle class, but we were a team. Dad and I ate burnt toast for dinner and laughed about it. We watched old movies and cried without feeling ashamed. We were broken, but we were warm. Then Lana walked in. She found us at the local church 6 months after the funeral. Lana was a widow herself, or so she said, though her widowhood looked very different from my father's. She wore black silk instead of wrinkled cotton. She drove a pristine sedan and smelled like expensive vanilla. She cornered my father at the coffee hour, touching his arm with a practiced gentleness, telling him she understood the hollow ache in his chest. She did not look like a grieving woman to me. She looked like a real estate agent closing a deal. But Dad was drowning in loneliness, and Lana threw him a lifeline. He introduced her to me as a miracle. He said she was God's way of saying we did not have to be sad forever. I wanted to scream that I was still sad, that I was not ready to replace the pictures on the mantel. But I looked at my father's tired eyes and I swallowed my protest. I wanted him to be happy more than I wanted to be heard. That was my first mistake. Lana moved in 3 months later, and she brought Brielle with her. Brielle was my age, but she seemed to exist in a different stratosphere. While I was wearing thrift store flannels and reading paperbacks, Brielle was experimenting with highlights and talking about dance camp. The transformation of our home was swift and surgical. My mother's quilts were folded up and put into the attic because they did not match Lana's aesthetic. The comfortable, worn armchair where Dad used to read to me was replaced by a stiff, beige sectional that we were terrified to sit on. The house stopped smelling like our dinner and started smelling like Lana's cleaning products, chemical lemon and bleach. But the furniture was just the surface. The real renovation happened to our family dynamic. Lana established the roles within the first week. She sat us down for a family meeting. Her hands clasped on the table. She spoke about order, about blending, about new beginnings, but what she really did was assign characters. Brielle was cast as the delicate flower. She was sensitive. She needed support. She needed new clothes to fit in at her new school because her self-esteem was fragile. I, on the other hand, was cast as the problem. Lana would look at me with a pitying smile and say that I was resilient. It sounded like a compliment, but it was a weapon. When I cried because I missed my mom, Lana would sigh and tell me that at my age, she had already lost both parents and was working 2 jobs. She invalidated my grief by burying it under her own superior suffering. She told Dad that I was stubborn, that I needed a firm hand to keep me from going off the rails. I was 14. I was on the honor roll. I had never missed curfew, but in Lana's version of reality, I was a delinquent in waiting. The scapegoating started with the small things. A glass would break in the dishwasher. If Brielle loaded it, it was a manufacturing defect. If I loaded it, it was my carelessness. If the living room was messy, it was because I was lazy, even if the magazines on the table were Brielle's teen tabloids. I remember one afternoon specifically, I came home to find Lana holding a utility bill. It was overdue. Dad had forgotten to leave the check before he went to work at Calder Industrial Services. Lana looked at me, her eyes cold. She asked why I had not reminded him. I told her I did not know the bill was due. She shook her head, a performance of deep disappointment. She told me that I needed to step up. She said that since I was the woman of the house when she was not around, the domestic failures were a reflection on me. I was 14, and suddenly the mortgage and the lights were my moral responsibility. Dad would come home from work, his boots heavy with mud, his shoulders slumped from a 12-hour shift. He just wanted peace. He wanted the fantasy of the happy family Lana promised him. So when Lana gave him the nightly report, a carefully curated list of my infractions and Brielle's triumphs, he believed her. He believed her because it was easier than looking closely. He would look at me with disappointed eyes and tell me to listen to Lana, that she was only trying to bring some discipline into my life. By the time I was 16, the financial abuse began in earnest. Lana announced at dinner that it was time for me to learn the value of $1. She said that real life was not free. Brielle, who was failing algebra but excelling at social climbing, was exempt from this lesson because she needed to focus on her extracurriculars. Brielle's job was to be popular. My job was to pay rent. I got a job at the local grocery store, bagging groceries and collecting carts in the slushy parking lot. I worked 20 hours a week after school. I thought the money would be mine to save for college or to buy the clothes I actually liked. I was wrong. Lana implemented a system. She called it a contribution tax. I had to pay for my own gas if I borrowed the old family car. I had to buy my own toiletries. If I wanted to eat anything other than the basic dinner she cooked, I had to buy it myself. She even charged me a laundry fee for using the washer and dryer, claiming that water was expensive. I handed over nearly 40% of my paycheck to her every 2 weeks. I remember standing in the kitchen, handing her a wad of $20 bills that smelled like the grocery store register. She would count it slowly, licking her thumb, and then tuck it into her purse. She told me she was teaching me how to survive in the real world. She said I would thank her one day. I did not thank her, but I did learn. I learned that money was freedom, and lack of money was a cage. I stopped complaining to Dad. I realized that every time I raised my voice, Lana would twist it. She would tell him I was being ungrateful, that I was attacking her after all she had done for us. Dad would look at me, pleading silently for me to just apologize so he could watch the news in peace. So I learned to be quiet. I learned to make myself invisible. School became my sanctuary. I buried myself in textbooks. I took every AP class available. I joined the math club, not because I loved math, but because it met on Tuesdays and Thursdays, which meant I did not have to go home until 5. I maintained a 4.0 grade point average. I won the district science fair. But in our house, my achievements were ghosts. If I brought home an A on a calculus exam, Lana would say, "That was nice," and then immediately pivot the conversation to Brielle. Brielle made the varsity cheerleading squad. Brielle learned a new dance routine. Brielle got 50 likes on her new profile picture. The dinner table conversations were a shrine to Brielle's mediocrity. My academic success was treated as something boring, something that did not sparkle. I learned the hardest lesson of all during my senior year. It was a Tuesday in March. The acceptance letter had come in the mail. I waited until dinner to open it, foolishly thinking that the magnitude of the news would force them to see me. I placed the letter on the table. I had been accepted to the State University for their Operations and Analytics program. It was a competitive program. I had also been awarded a partial academic scholarship that covered 50% of the tuition. My heart was hammering against my ribs as I read the letter aloud. For a second, just a second, I saw a flicker of pride in my father's eyes. He opened his mouth to speak, to say congratulations. Lana cut him off. She did not smile. She picked up the letter, scanned the financial section, and dropped it back onto the table like a used napkin. She asked who was going to pay the other 50%. I froze. I explained that I could take out loans, that I could work. I said it was an investment. Lana let out a sharp, incredulous laugh. She looked at Dad and told him that I was delusional. She asked him if he had $40,000 lying around. She said that I was selfish to even consider burdening the family with that kind of debt, just so I could go party in a dorm room. Dad looked at the letter, then at Lana, then at his hands. He sighed, the sound of a man who had been beaten down by years of subtle erosion. He told me that money was tight right now. He said the industry was slowing down. Then came the pivot. Lana smiled, that shark-like smile, and offered the solution she had clearly been sitting on. She suggested I stay home. She said the community college 2 towns over had business classes. She said I could live here, keep my job at the grocery store, and commute. She called it the smart choice. She called it the mature decision. I looked at Brielle. She was picking at her salad, bored. We all knew that when Brielle graduated the next year, there would be money for her. There would be money for a dorm, for a sorority, for a car. Because Brielle's dreams were treated as necessities. My dreams were classified as luxuries we could not afford. I looked at my father, waiting for him to fight for me, waiting for him to say that I earned this, that we would figure it out. He just took a bite of his meatloaf and said that Lana made a good point. He said we had to be realistic. That was the night the last piece of my childhood died. I realized that I was not a daughter to them. I was a tenant. I was an appliance that was expected to function without maintenance. I was the scapegoat who absorbed the family's stress so Brielle could remain the golden child. I declined the offer from the State University. I enrolled in the community college, but I made a vow to myself. I stopped trying to be part of the family. I started treating my life like a logistical operation. I switched my shifts at the grocery store to overnights, because the pay was $2 an hour higher. I slept when they were awake. I was awake when they slept. I moved through the house like a shadow, minimizing my footprint, hoarding my money, and observing. I watched how Lana moved money between accounts. I watched how she manipulated Dad with tears and sex and guilt. I watched how Brielle learned to weaponize her incompetence. I retreated into silence. They thought I was defeated. They thought they had broken my spirit and molded me into the obedient, invisible worker bee they wanted. They were wrong. I was not broken. I was calibrating. I was learning how to survive in a hostile environment with zero resources. I was learning how to analyze a system that was rigged against me. And most importantly, I was learning that in this house, love was not a currency I could ever earn. So I started saving a different kind of currency. I started saving my rage, compressing it down into a cold, hard diamond of resolve. I became the scapegoat, yes, but they forgot that the goat is the one animal that can climb out of anything, given enough time. I just needed a way out. I did not know then that it would take 10 years and a pool of my own blood to finally find the exit. But looking back, that dinner table was where I started packing my emotional bags. I was just waiting for the right moment to walk out the door. My college years were not defined by dorm parties or spring break trips to Florida. They were defined by the smell of burnt coffee, the hum of fluorescent lights in the library basement, and a schedule so tight that a single traffic jam could derail my entire week. I was working 30-plus hours a week at a warehouse on the edge of town while carrying a full course load at the community college. I had to. Lana had made it clear that not a single cent of family money would flow in my direction. But in the midst of that exhaustion, I found something unexpected. I found my brain. I was taking an introductory course on operations management. Most students found it dry. A boring necessity for a business degree. I found it electrifying. We were given a case study about the campus delivery system, a messy, inefficient tangle of trucks and routes. While other students tried to patch the existing problems, I tore the whole model down and rebuilt it on paper. I color-coded the bottlenecks. I rerouted the supply lines based on traffic patterns I had observed during my own commute. My professor, a retired logistics director named Mr. Henderson, looked at my final project for a long time. He pushed his glasses up his nose and looked at me. He told me that most people look at the pieces on the board, but I had the rare ability to see the whole chessboard at once. He told me I had a mind for systems. For the first time in years, someone looked at me and saw potential instead of a burden. It was that same semester, fueled by caffeine and newfound confidence, that I met Luca. I was at the campus coffee shop, trying to spread out my oversized diagrams on a tiny, wobbling round table. I was aggressively highlighting a route map in neon orange when a shadow fell over my paper. I looked up to see a guy with messy dark hair and paint smudges on his hoodie. He was holding a sketchbook and looking at my diagram with genuine curiosity. He asked if I was planning a military invasion or just trying to figure out the campus shuttle schedule. I blinked, surprised that anyone was talking to me. I told him it was an optimization plan for a hypothetical medical supply chain. He laughed, and it was a nice laugh, easy and open. He introduced himself as Luca Hale. He was an architecture student, which explained the paint and the charcoal stains on his fingers. He asked if he could share my table because every other seat was taken by freshmen pretending to study. That afternoon turned into 2 years of shared silence and quiet understanding. Luca was different from the boys I had known in high school. He did not care about status. He drove a beat-up Honda that rattled when it went over 40 miles per hour. We bonded over the fact that we were both broke. We had dates that consisted of splitting a $5 pizza and sitting in his car, talking until the windows fogged up. I told him about my dad working away. I told him I had a stepmother, but I kept the details vague. I painted a picture of a distant, slightly cold family, not the active war zone I actually lived in. I was terrified that if he knew the truth, if he knew about the financial control, the gaslighting, the way I had to hide my shampoo so Brielle would not use it all, he would look at me like I was damaged goods. But Luca had a way of seeing things, too. He was an architect. He looked for structural integrity. One evening, he invited me to dinner at his mother's house. I was terrified. I expected a judgment session like the ones Lana held. I was wrong. Margaret Hale lived in a small, tidy bungalow that smelled like roasted chicken and rosemary. She was a nurse who had moved into hospital administration, a woman with sharp, intelligent eyes and a voice that was low and warm. She did not hug me immediately. She shook my hand firmly, looking me dead in the eye, assessing me. Dinner was simple. We sat at a round wooden table, and for the first time in forever, I watched a family interact without tension. Luca teased his mom about her gardening. Margaret teased him about his haircut. There were no hidden barbs. There was no subtext. But Margaret was watching me. I could feel it. When Luca went to the kitchen to get dessert, Margaret leaned forward slightly. She asked me how long I had been working the night shift. I was surprised. I asked how she knew. She pointed to the faint tremors in my hands and the dark circles I tried to hide with concealer. She told me she had worked the graveyard shift for 10 years in the ER. She said she knew the look of a girl who was running on fumes. I gave her my standard deflection. I smiled a tight, practice smile and said I was fine, that I could handle it. Margaret did not push. She just watched me with a gaze that felt like a medical scan. She saw the flinch when a spoon dropped. She saw the way I ate everything on my plate as if I did not know when the next meal was coming. She saw me. Things were looking up, though. Near the end of my second year, my professor, Mr. Henderson, recommended me for a paid internship at Northway Logistics Group. It was a massive opportunity. It came with a real salary, not just a stipend, and a clear path to a full-time position after graduation. I came home that day feeling like I was floating. I made the mistake of sharing the news. Lana was in the living room, watching TV. When I told her about the offer, about the salary that was more than what she made selling her essential oils, her face did not light up. It darkened. Fear flickered behind her eyes. I did not understand it then, but I understand it now. A poor Erica was controllable. A dependent Erica had to stay in line, but an Erica with a corporate salary and a background in logistics? That was a threat. A logistics expert notices when numbers do not add up. An analyst tracks inventory and expenses. Lana offered a thin, tight smile. She asked if I was sure I could handle it. She said I looked so tired already. She asked if I really wanted to add more stress to my poor father's life by potentially failing at a big company. I ignored her. I accepted the offer. That was when the paper trail started to disappear. My acceptance packet from Northway, which contained my badge instructions and tax forms, never arrived. When I called HR in a panic, they said they had mailed it 2 weeks ago. I found it 3 days later in the bottom of the kitchen trash, under coffee grounds. When I confronted Lana, she shrugged. She said it looked like junk mail. She said I should be more careful about where I had my important papers sent. Then my student loan deferment paperwork vanished. But the real blow, the one that nearly broke me, came in the form of a credit card statement. It arrived on a Saturday when Lana was out getting her hair done. I usually never checked the mail first. Lana always intercepted it. But the mail carrier came early. I saw an envelope from a major credit card company. It had my name on it, Erica Swanson. I frowned. I did not have a credit card with that bank. I opened it, standing in the driveway, my hands starting to shake. It was a statement for a platinum rewards card. The balance was nearly $4,000. My eyes scanned the transaction list. It was a catalog of Brielle's life. The Sapphire Boutique, $300. Luxe Salon, $150. Tech World, $1,200 for a new laptop. Weekend Getaway Resort, $800. I felt like the ground was dissolving under my feet. This was identity theft. This was a felony. I waited for Lana in the kitchen. I laid the statement on the table, smoothing it out with trembling fingers. When she walked in, looking fresh and expensive, I pointed at the paper. I asked her what this was. Lana did not even blink. She set her purse down and poured herself a glass of water. She looked at the paper and then at me with an expression of mild annoyance. She told me to lower my voice. I shouted that there were charges for Brielle's laptop on a card in my name. I told her I was calling the police. Lana turned on me then, and the speed of her aggression took my breath away. She laughed. She told me to go ahead and call them. She asked me who they would believe. She said that I must have opened the card and forgotten, or maybe I gave it to Brielle as a gift because I felt guilty for being such a burden. I told her she was lying. I told her this was fraud. Then she played her ace. She stepped close to me, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. She reminded me that Dad was the co-signer on my student loans. She told me that their finances were linked. She said that if I started a fraud investigation, the banks would freeze everything. Dad's credit would be ruined. She looked me dead in the eye and asked if I wanted to be the reason my father had a stroke. She told me he was already stressed, working himself to death in the cold, and if I brought this shame to his door, it would kill him. She said his heart could not take a scandal. She gaslit me so hard I started to question my own memory. Had I signed something? Had I agreed to help Brielle? No, I knew I hadn't, but the threat against Dad was real. He was my Achilles heel, and she knew it. If I reported her, I hurt him. If I stayed silent, I paid the price. Lana patted my cheek. She told me to be a good sister and pay the bill. She said it was the least I could do for the family that put a roof over my head. I crumbled. I did not call the police. I did not call Dad. I was 21 years old, terrified, and convinced that protecting my father meant absorbing his wife's poison. I took the statement. I set up a payment plan. My life became a blur of labor. I picked up extra shifts at the warehouse. I started driving for a food delivery service on weekends. I was working 60 hours a week while trying to maintain my internship and my grades. I stopped seeing Luca as much. I canceled dates because I had to work, or because I was too exhausted to hold a conversation. I could not tell him that I was paying off $4,000 of designer clothes for a stepsister who treated me like dirt. I was too ashamed. I felt stupid. I felt weak. But Margaret saw. I went to Sunday dinner at the Hale house after a double shift. I had lost 10 pounds in a month. My clothes were hanging off me. I almost fell asleep at the table. When I was leaving, Margaret walked me to my car. She did not ask me what was wrong this time. She knew I would lie. Instead, she handed me a Tupperware container of leftovers. She looked at my car, then at me. She told me that she kept a journal. She said she wrote down things that seemed important, even if they did not make sense at the time. She told me that she had started writing down the dates when I looked like I had been crying. She told me she noticed that I flinched when people moved too fast. I tried to laugh it off. I told her I was just stressed about finals. Margaret put her hand on my shoulder. It was heavy and warm. She said that whenever I was ready to stop running, she would be there. She said the truth has a way of leaving scars, and she knew how to read them. I drove home that night crying, the tears hot and angry. I paid the minimum balance on the fraudulent card. I hid the statement under my mattress. I thought I was trapping myself, digging a hole I could never climb out of. I did not know that Margaret Hale was already building a ladder for me. I just had to be brave enough to reach for it, but for now, I was still Lana's prisoner, held by a chain made of my love for my father. The contract my father signed for the job in North Dakota was supposed to be our salvation. It was a short-term supervisor role for a pipeline project. 6 months of grueling work in freezing temperatures, but the pay was astronomical. Dad sat at the kitchen table the night before he left, running the numbers on a yellow legal pad. He looked 20 years younger. He told us that with this money, we could pay off the mortgage, clear the credit cards, and finally breathe. He looked at me with tears in his eyes and said this was the fresh start we all needed. He did not know that he was signing his own exile warrant. I was in the hallway, folding towels, when I heard Lana whispering to him in the bedroom. She was packing his suitcase, her voice low and urgent. She told him not to worry about the house. She said she would handle everything, and then, the poison. She told him not to let me leech off him while he was gone. She said I needed to learn independence, that I was getting too comfortable living under his roof for free. She told him to send the checks directly to the joint account, the one she controlled, so she could manage the budget without me interfering. Dad, blinded by love and relief, agreed. He kissed her forehead and promised to do exactly as she said. The morning he left, the atmosphere in the house shifted before his truck had even cleared the driveway. It was physical. The air pressure dropped. Lana stood on the porch waving a handkerchief like a grieving war wife until his taillights disappeared. Then, she dropped her hand. Her shoulders relaxed. She turned to walk back inside, and as she passed me, she didn't even look at my face. She just walked to the fridge, opened a bottle of white wine at 9 a.m, and smiled. The mask was not just slipped off, it was thrown into the trash. The new regime began immediately. That evening, I came home from my internship to find a handwritten note on my bed. It was an invoice. Lana was charging me rent. It was not a nominal fee to help with groceries. It was $500 a month. I stared at the number. $500 was exactly, to the penny, the minimum payment due on the fraudulent credit card she had opened in my name. She wasn't asking for rent. She was forcing me to subsidize her theft. I took the note to the living room where she and Brielle were watching a reality show about rich housewives. I tried to be calm. I had my budget spreadsheet on my phone. I explained that between my student loans, the gas for my commute, and saving for a deposit on an apartment, $500 would bleed me dry. I told her Dad said I could stay for free until I got on my feet. Lana did not even mute the TV. She told me that Dad was not here. She said that as long as I was using her water and her electricity, I would pay. She called me a freeloader. She said I was hiding money in a secret slush fund, eating up my father's resources while pretending to be poor. Brielle chimed in, not looking up from her phone, saying that at her age, she planned to be making six figures, so she didn't understand why I was struggling so much. I paid the money. I had no choice. I was trapped in the house, and I was terrified she would call Dad and tell him I was refusing to help. But the rent was just the opening salvo. 2 weeks later, the letter from the collection agency arrived. It was not for a credit card. It was for a personal loan. $10,000. Taken out 6 months ago from one of those predatory storefront lenders that charge triple-digit interest rates. My hands shook so hard, I nearly ripped the paper. I had never set foot in a loan office. I scanned the document, looking for the error, looking for the proof it was a mistake. And then I saw the signatures. There was a forgery of my signature, clumsy and looped, clearly done by someone who didn't know how I signed my middle initial, but next to it, in bold, unmistakably authentic blue ink, was my father's signature as a co-signer. The world tilted. I felt nauseous. I realized instantly what had happened. Lana must have slipped the paper in with a stack of other documents, insurance forms, tax papers, when Dad was rushing out the door for a shift. She probably told him it was just something for the house, or maybe something for me that I was too shy to ask for. He trusted her implicitly. He would have signed his own death certificate if she told him it was a birthday card. This was not just shopping addiction. This was systematic financial predation. Lana had built an entire infrastructure of debt, using my identity as the foundation and my father's credit as the walls. I had to call him. I couldn't protect him from this anymore. If I didn't stop it, she would bankrupt us both before he ever came back from North Dakota. I waited until I knew he would be on his lunch break. I dialed his number. It rang twice, and then the line picked up. Hello? It was Lana. My blood ran cold. Why did she have his phone? Then I realized she didn't. She had call forwarding set up, or she was monitoring the family plan, or maybe she had just called him first. I hung up. I waited 10 minutes. I called again. This time, Dad answered, but he sounded exhausted. His voice was thick with fatigue, the sound of a man who had been awake for 18 hours welding pipe in the snow. I tried to explain. I started talking fast, stumbling over my words. I told him about the loan. I told him about the rent. I told him about the credit card. He cut me off. He sounded irritated. He told me that Lana had already called him. She had told him that I was having a hard time adjusting to him being gone. She told him I was obsessing over money and causing drama in the house because I was jealous of the time she spent with him. I begged him to listen. I told him to check his credit report. He sighed, a long but heavy sound that broke my heart. He told me he was 1,200 miles away. He said he was doing this for us. He said he couldn't referee a catfight from North Dakota. He told me to just listen to Lana. He said she was trying to help me grow up. He said I needed to stop being so difficult. Then the line went dead. He had to go back to work. I stood in the hallway, the phone slipping from my sweaty grip. He didn't believe me. Lana had insulated him so thoroughly that the truth sounded like hysteria. That night, the night that ended everything, I snapped. I could not sleep. I could not eat. I gathered every piece of evidence I had. The credit card statements I had managed to intercept, the loan document, the rent invoice in Lana's handwriting, the emails from the bank alerting me to suspicious activity. I spread them out on the kitchen island. It looked like a war room. I was going to make her look at it. I was going to force her to acknowledge the theft, and then I was going to tell her that I was going to the police in the morning, regardless of what it did to Dad. I decided that saving him meant destroying his illusion. It was just after 11 when she walked in. She was wearing that silk robe, looking like the queen of a castle she hadn't paid for. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I pointed to the papers. I walked her through the timeline. I showed her the dates that matched her trips to the mall. I showed her the loan application date that matched the week she bought new furniture for the living room. Lana didn't look at the papers. She looked at me. Her face went blank. Then slowly, a terrifying smile spread across her lips. She asked me if I really thought I could win this. She stepped closer, invading my personal space. She whispered that I was a guest. She said I was nothing. Then, she did something that froze the marrow in my bones. She looked me in the eye, raised her left hand, and dug her manicured nails deep into the soft flesh of her own right forearm. She raked them down hard, leaving 3 angry, bleeding welts. I gasped. I asked her what she was doing. She started screaming. It wasn't a scream of pain, it was a scream of performance. She shrieked for help. She yelled that I was hurting her. She threw herself back against the counter, knocking a bowl of fruit onto the floor. I stood there, paralyzed. This was not an argument. This was a setup. She slapped me then. It was the slap I told you about earlier, the one that sent me crashing into the wine glass. But now you understand why it happened. It wasn't just anger. It was choreography. She needed a mark on me, and she needed a scene of chaos. When Brielle appeared with the phone, it wasn't a spontaneous reaction. She had been waiting in the hall. They had discussed this. They had a contingency plan for the day I finally figured it out. Lana was screaming about assault. She was yelling that I was mentally unstable, that I had attacked her with a knife, referring to the letter opener I had used to open the loan envelope. My hand was bleeding on the floor. The glass was shattered, and Lana was standing over me, looking like a victim, while Brielle recorded the evidence that would send me to jail. I looked up at her, clutching my wrist. I saw the triumph in her eyes. She told me she would call the police. She said she would tell them I had a psychotic break. She said with my history of financial trouble, which she had manufactured, and this video, I would be arrested. She said I would lose my internship. She said I would never work in logistics again. And she was right. In that moment, in that kitchen. The truth did not matter. Evidence requires a context to be believed, and she controlled the context. She told me to get out. She gave me the duffel bag. I scrambled to pack, my mind racing. I needed my laptop. It had my internship work, my case studies, my digital evidence. It was sitting on the dining table. As I walked toward the door, I reached for it. Lana snatched it away. She hugged it to her chest. She told me that Dad bought it. She said it was household property. She said I wasn't taking anything that belonged to them. I tried to grab it back, but Brielle stepped in front of me, phone still raised. If I touched them, it was assault. If I fought for my property, I went to jail. I looked at the laptop. My entire future was on that hard drive, but my freedom was on the other side of the door. I made the choice. I grabbed the cheap duffel bag. I checked my pocket for my phone. 7% battery. I looked at Lana one last time. She was checking her reflection in the microwave door, smoothing her hair. She wasn't scared. She was bored. I walked out the front door. The cold air hit me like a physical blow. I heard the lock click behind me, sealing the tomb of my childhood. I stood on the porch, my hand throbbing, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I was a fugitive from my own life. I had been framed, robbed, and exiled in the span of 20 minutes. I walked down the driveway, past the spot where Dad used to park his truck. I felt like an intruder. I felt like a ghost. I didn't know where I was going. I just knew I couldn't stop moving. Because if I stopped, I would scream. And if I screamed, no one in this neighborhood would open their door. They would just turn up the volume on their TVs. I reached the sidewalk and turned toward the dark end of the street. I was walking away from the only home I had ever known. But strange as it sounds, as the numbness of the shock began to settle in, I felt a tiny, dangerous spark of clarity. Lana thought she had won. She thought she had disposed of the evidence by throwing me out, but she forgot one thing. I was the evidence, and I was still walking. The silence on the other side of the door was absolute. I stood on the concrete porch, shivering in my thin hoodie, staring at the wood grain of the door that I had walked through thousands of times. Just 10 minutes ago, I had a room, I had a bed. Now, I was standing in the dark with a bleeding hand and a duffel bag full of wrinkled laundry. I stepped off the porch and walked to the edge of the driveway, my sneakers crunching on the gravel. I needed to call someone. I needed a plan. I pulled my phone out of my pocket. 7% battery. The screen glowed with a sickly white light, illuminating the blood smear on my thumb. I scrolled through my contacts, my heart hammering a frantic rhythm against my ribs. My friends? Most of them had moved to Columbus or Cleveland after graduation. The ones still in town were living with their parents, just like me, or in tiny apartments with roommates. I could not show up on their doorstep at midnight, bleeding and hysterical, asking to crash on a couch. It was too much shame to swallow. I tried Dad again. It went straight to voicemail. Lana must have turned his phone off remotely or blocked my number on the family plan. Panic began to rise in my throat, hot and sour. I had nowhere to go. I was 27 years old, and I was effectively homeless. My thumb hovered over Luca's name. I hesitated. We had been dating for 6 months, but we were still in that phase where you try to present the best version of yourself. I did not want him to see this version, the broken, bleeding, evicted version. I did not want to be a burden. But then a gust of wind cut through my jeans, and the reality of the temperature hit me. It was going to drop to near freezing tonight. I typed the message, my fingers stiff. Lana kicked me out. I am on the curb. I do not have my keys. I do not know where to go. I hit send. I watched the progress bar crawl across the top of the screen. It stalled. Then, the word delivered appeared. 1 second later, the screen went black. The empty battery icon flashed once, a red rectangle of defeat, and the phone died. I stared at the black glass. "No," I whispered. "No. Please." I pressed the power button. Nothing. I was alone. I walked to the curb and sat down. The concrete was icy damp. I pulled the duffel bag onto my lap and wrapped my arms around it, trying to conserve body warmth. I looked up and down the street. It was a quiet Tuesday night in Maple Ridge. Blue light flickered in the windows of my neighbors' houses. They were watching TV, safe and warm. I opened my wallet. I counted the bills by the light of the street lamp. 3 tens, 1 5, 3 ones, $38. The cheapest motel in town, the Red Roof Inn out by the highway, charged $60 a night. I did not have enough for a room. I did not have a car to sleep in. I did not have a phone to call a cab even if I could afford one. I calculated my options. I could walk to the 24-hour diner near the interstate. It was about 5 miles away. If I bought a coffee, they might let me sit in a booth until morning. Then I could walk to the warehouse for my shift. The thought of walking 5 miles in the dark with a slashed palm made me want to vomit. I sat there for what felt like hours, though it was probably only 20 minutes. My teeth started to chatter. The pain in my hand had turned from a sharp sting to a deep, throbbing ache that pulsed all the way up to my elbow. Then, I saw headlights turn the corner. My stomach dropped. It was probably a police cruiser. Lana had actually done it. She had called the cops to report me for trespassing or assault. I braced myself, rehearsing what I would say, wondering if they would handcuff me. But the lights were not flashing. It was a silver SUV. It moved slowly, prowling down the street, checking house numbers. It pulled up to the curb right in front of me. The engine hummed quietly. I squinted against the glare. I did not recognize the car. The driver's side door opened. A woman stepped out. She was wearing a thick wool coat and sensible boots. It was Margaret Hale. I blinked, sure I was hallucinating from the cold. "Margaret?" She did not wave. She did not smile. She walked around to the back of the SUV and popped the trunk. She lifted out a medium-sized hard-shell suitcase and a large stainless steel thermos. The passenger door opened, and Luca scrambled out. He was wearing pajama pants and a hoodie, and he was clutching a thick quilt. "Erica!" Luca's voice was cracked with panic. He ran toward me, stumbling a little on the grass. Margaret was faster. She reached me first. She did not ask me what happened. She did not ask why I was sitting on the curb. She set the suitcase down on the pavement with a solid thud, placed the thermos on top of it, and looked down at me. "You are not sleeping on this porch tonight," she said. Her voice was not loud, but it had the weight of iron. I looked at her, and the dam broke. The shame, the fear, the cold, it all crashed over me at once. I started to cry. Ugly, gasping sobs that shook my whole body. Margaret knelt down on the concrete. She did not hug me right away. She was a nurse. She assessed the damage first. She saw the bloody towel wrapped around my hand. "Let me see," she said gently. I held out my hand. She unwrapped the towel, her movements precise and professional. She hissed slightly when she saw the cut. "It is deep, but it has stopped bleeding actively," she murmured. She reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small first aid kit. She cleaned the wound with an antiseptic wipe. I winced, but she held my wrist firm and wrapped it swiftly in fresh gauze and medical tape. "Luca," she said without looking up. "Blanket." Luca was there instantly, draping the heavy quilt over my shoulders. He wrapped his arms around me, burying his face in my hair. He was shaking, vibrating with anger. "I am going to kill her," he whispered. "I am going to kick that door down and—" "You are going to do no such thing," Margaret said sharply. She finished taping my hand and stood up, pulling me up with her. She looked me in the eyes. Her face was stern, but her eyes were incredibly kind. "Erica, look at me." I sniffled, wiping my nose on my sleeve. "I am so sorry. Margaret, I did not mean to drag you into this. My phone died and—" "Stop," she said. "Do not apologize for surviving." She picked up the suitcase and handed it to Luca. Then she poured a cup of steaming coffee from the thermos and pressed it into my freezing hands. "20 years ago," Margaret said, her voice low so the neighbors would not hear. "I stood on a curb in Cincinnati with a 2-year-old Luca on my hip and a black eye. I had nothing but the clothes on my back. I know that look in your eyes. Erica, it is the look of someone who thinks her life is over." She pointed to the suitcase Luca was holding. "That is not empty," she said. I looked at the suitcase. It was a gray carry-on. "What is in it?" "I have been packing it for 3 months," Margaret said. "Ever since I saw how thin you were getting. Ever since I saw the bruises under your eyes." She listed the contents like she was reading a manifest. 3 pairs of jeans in your size, 5 shirts, underwear, socks, a brand new set of scrubs for your shift at the warehouse tomorrow, because I knew you would worry about missing work, toothbrush, shampoo, and a folder. "A folder?" I asked, my voice trembling. "A folder marked important," Margaret said. "Inside, there are printouts of Ohio tenant rights laws. There is a guide on how to freeze your credit with all 3 bureaus. There are the numbers for legal aid, and there is a spare charger for your phone." I stared at her. She had not just come to pick me up. She had come prepared to evacuate a refugee. She had applied logistics to my trauma before I even knew I was in danger. "Why?" I whispered. Margaret placed her hands on my shoulders. "Because family is not about whose blood you have. It is about who bleeds for you. And right now, that woman in that house is not your family. She is your landlord, and a bad one at that." She looked at the dark house behind me, her expression hardening. "If you want to go back in there and beg her to let you stay, I will not stop you. I will wait right here until you are safe. But if you choose to get in that car, I am telling you now, I am standing with you. We will fight this, but we will fight it from a position of strength, not from a sidewalk." I looked at the house. I looked at the window where I knew Brielle was probably watching. I looked at the door that my father had installed. Then I looked at Luca, who was holding the suitcase like it was the crown jewels. And I looked at Margaret, who was offering me a way out that did not involve surrender. "I do not want to go back," I said. "Good," Margaret said. "Then let's go home." Luca guided me toward the SUV. He opened the back door and helped me in. The car was warm. It smelled of vanilla air freshener and safety. As Margaret started the engine, Luca climbed in the back seat next to me. He took my bandaged hand in his and kissed the knuckles. "We will figure this out," he said fiercely. "I promise. We will fix the credit. We will call your dad. We will handle it one thing at a time. My mom is a planning expert." Margaret put the car in gear. We pulled away from the curb slowly. I turned my head and looked out the back window. I watched my father's house shrink in the distance. I saw the porch light where I had sat 5 minutes ago, thinking I was trash. A strange sensation washed over me. It was painful, like a physical ache in my chest. But underneath the pain, there was relief. It felt like when you finally pull a deep, infected thorn out of your foot. The wound still hurts, but the foreign object is gone. The poison can stop spreading. I leaned my head back against the seat and closed my eyes. That night, the night my stepmother beat me, was the night I lost the family I was born into. But the night my boyfriend's mother showed up with a suitcase, I found something else. I found a family that chose me. And as we drove away into the dark, leaving Maple Ridge behind, I realized that Margaret was right. I was not a victim fleeing a crime scene. I was a survivor moving to a new location. And this time, I had backup. Waking up in the Hale living room was a disorienting experience. For the last 10 years, my morning routine had been defined by hypervigilance. I would wake up, listen for the tenor of Lana's footsteps to gauge her mood, check the position of my door to make sure Brielle hadn't sneaked in, and mentally rehearse my apologies for offenses I hadn't committed yet. But on that Wednesday morning, the only sound was the rhythmic whirring of a coffee grinder and the low hum of the refrigerator. I was lying on a fold-out sofa bed that had been made up with crisp, smelling of lavender sheets. Sunlight was streaming through a window that wasn't blocked by heavy, dusty drapes. I sat up, panic flaring for a microsecond. I am late. I am in trouble. Before the memory of the night before washed over me, the porch, the blood, the suitcase. I was safe. I walked into the kitchen, wearing the oversized t-shirt Margaret had packed for me. Margaret was already sitting at the small round table. She wasn't cooking breakfast. She was staring at a laptop, wearing reading glasses, with a notepad arranged perfectly parallel to the keyboard. She looked up when I entered. She didn't ask how I slept. She tapped the chair next to her. "Coffee is in the pot," she said, her voice brisk and professional. "Drink up. We have a shift change to manage." I poured a mug and sat down. I expected a therapy session. I expected her to ask me about my feelings. Instead, Margaret turned the laptop toward me. On the screen was a spreadsheet. "I made a triage list," she said. "In the ER, when a patient comes in with multiple traumas, you don't panic, you stabilize the airway, you stop the bleeding, and then you treat the breaks. Your life right now is a trauma patient. We are going to stabilize it." I looked at the list. It was titled Operation Clean Break. Item 1. Freeze credit reports with all 3 bureaus. Item 2. File fraud disputes for the unauthorized card and loan. Item 3. Document physical injuries, photos and written statement. Item 4. Archive all communication. I stared at the screen. My life, which felt like a swirling, suffocating hurricane of emotions, was reduced to 12-point font and bullet points. And something strange happened in my brain. The panic receded, replaced by a familiar hum. This was data. This was a checklist. This was logistics. "You think your life is a mess," Margaret said, watching my eyes scan the list. "It is not a mess, Erica. It is just a complex system failure, and systems can be fixed." She pushed a pen toward me. "Let's start with the credit freeze. It stops the bleeding." We spent the next 4 hours working. Margaret used her administrative experience to cut through the jargon. She explained that Lana wasn't an omnipotent monster. She was just a sloppy criminal relying on my fear to keep me silent. When we got to the part about the police, I hesitated. She said she would tell them I attacked her. She has that video. Margaret took off her glasses. The law has limits, Erica. That video shows a reaction, not an initiation, and you have a defensive wound on your hand, documented by a registered nurse. Me, dated last night. Plus, false reporting is a crime. Lana is a bully. Bullies rely on the victim believing they have infinite power. They don't. They usually fold the moment you ask for a paper trail. By noon, we had frozen my credit, initiated a fraud alert, and I had written a detailed timeline of the previous night. I looked at the stack of papers. It didn't fix the hole in my heart where my father used to be, but it built a wall around the rest of me. Now, Margaret said, closing the laptop. You need income. You cannot pay a deposit on a new apartment with a frozen credit card. I nodded. I can pick up more shifts at the warehouse. You can, Margaret said. Or you can use your brain. I made a call this morning. She handed me a sticky note with an address, Rivergate Medical Network, Central Supply. I used to work with the director of operations there, she said. They are having a crisis with their inventory management. I told him I knew a young woman who could organize a hurricane if given a clipboard. Go see him at 2:00. It is part-time to start, just helping in the back. But it is a foot in the door. I went. The Rivergate warehouse was a cavernous building filled with medical supplies for 3 hospitals and a dozen clinics. It was also a disaster zone. Pallets of saline solution were blocking the aisle to the cardiac kits. The high-turnover items like gloves and masks were stored on the top shelves, requiring a forklift every time someone needed a box, while the obscure, once-a-year surgical tools were at eye level. It was inefficient. It was chaotic. It was beautiful. I met the warehouse manager, a gruff man named Miller, who looked like he hadn't slept in a week. He looked at my resume, then at the chaos behind him. Margaret says you are smart. I don't need smart. I need someone who can find a box of size 7 sterile gloves without sending a search party. Your gloves are on shelf D4, I said immediately, pointing to the ceiling, which is why you can't find them. They should be in Zone A, near the loading dock, because they have the highest velocity of movement. Miller raised an eyebrow. You have 3 days. If you can make this place 10% less of a headache, I will keep you. I didn't just make it 10% better. I went to war with the inefficiency. For the next 2 weeks, I worked like a woman possessed. I didn't just move boxes. I restructured the flow. I applied the principles I had learned in my classes and the survival instincts I had honed living with Lana. I treated every box of syringes like a hostage that needed a clear escape route. I created a color-coded tagging system for expiration dates. I cleared the dead stock out of the prime locations. I would come home to the Hales house exhausted, smelling of cardboard dust and packing tape, but for the first time in years, I wasn't mentally drained. I was energized. One afternoon, Miller walked by while I was directing a forklift driver to reorganize the IV fluid pallet. He watched for a minute, then cleared his throat. We saved 4 hours on the morning loadout today, he said. Drivers got to the clinics before the morning rush for the first time in 6 months. I wiped sweat from my forehead. It is just flow dynamics. Mr. Miller, you had your intake and outtake crossing paths. I just uncrossed them. Have you ever thought about doing this full-time? He asked. I have a coordinator position opening up. It pays double what you are making now, benefits, and you wouldn't be moving boxes. You would be telling the boxes where to go. I stood there, holding a clipboard, and felt a surge of pride so strong it almost knocked me over. Yes, I said, I have thought about it. But the days were only half the battle. The nights were for the investigation. After dinner, Luca would clear the small kitchen table, and we would open the war chest, the suitcase. Luca was an architecture student, but he was also a wizard with data visualization. He taught me how to use advanced spreadsheet functions to track the financial abuse. We inputted every transaction from the fraudulent credit card statement. We cross-referenced them with Lana's social media posts. Look at this, Luca said one evening, pointing to a graph on his screen. Here is a charge for $200 at a steakhouse in Columbus on October 12th. And here, he swiped to a screenshot of Lana's Instagram. is a photo of her and Brielle captioning Girls' Night Out on October 12th. She ate a steak dinner on my credit, I whispered, anger simmering in my gut. She ate my future. And we can prove it, Luca said, his voice hard. This isn't just a bill, Erica. It is a time-stamped confession. Seeing it laid out like that, as data points, as a timeline, helped me separate the emotion from the fact. Lana wasn't just my evil stepmother. She was an embezzler. She was a financial predator who had targeted me because I was convenient. It made the betrayal feel less personal and more criminal. But the personal side still bled through. My phone, now charged and turned back on, would occasionally buzz with a text from Dad. Erica, I don't understand why you are doing this. Lana is a wreck. Why did you refuse to pay rent? We agreed you would help out. Are you safe? Lana says you ran off with some boy. Every message was a knife twist. He was parroting her narrative. I could hear her voice in his texts. She had gotten to him first, painting me as the unstable, ungrateful daughter who had snapped and abandoned the family. I typed out a dozen replies. I wanted to scream at him. I wanted to send him the graph Luca made. I wanted to ask him how he could believe I would attack the woman he loved. But Margaret stopped me. She put a hand on my phone one night when I was shaking with the effort of not sending a paragraph of defense. Do not argue with a man who is listening to a different radio station, she said. Right now, he is tuned to Lana FM. Anything you say will be distorted by the static. You wait. You wait until you have the full dossier. You wait until you can walk in, put the evidence on the table, and turn off her radio for good. So I replied with 5 words. I am safe. We will talk. I didn't ask for money. I didn't apologize. I drew a boundary. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. A month later, I was sitting in a glass-walled office overlooking the warehouse floor at Rivergate. I was officially the logistics coordinator. I had a salary. I had health insurance. I had a lanyard with my name on it, Erica Swanson. And no one here knew me as the girl who got kicked out. They knew me as the woman who fixed the supply line. I watched a forklift move a pallet of vaccines toward the loading dock. It moved smoothly, following the path I had designed. There was no wasted motion, no collision. I realized something then. For 10 years, I had been a passenger in my own life. I had let Lana drive, let Dad navigate, and let Brielle pick the music. I had just been cargo, bumped around in the trunk. But looking at that warehouse, seeing the physical manifestation of my will, I understood the power of the system. Who controls the route, controls the power. Lana had controlled the flow of information to my father. She had controlled the flow of money in the house. That was how she hurt me. She didn't beat me with fists. She beat me with logistics. And if that was the game she wanted to play, she had made a critical error. She had forced me to become an expert at it. I picked up my pen and opened a new file on my computer. I wasn't just building routes for medical supplies anymore. I was building a route back to the truth. Lana had taught me the crushing weight of being robbed of everything. But Margaret, with her checklists and her suitcase, had taught me something far more dangerous to a liar. She taught me how to take the wheel, and I was done being a passenger. Fast forward 3 years. If you Googled my name when I was 27, you would find absolutely nothing. I was a ghost with a damaged credit score and a fear of opening mail. But if you Googled Erica Swanson now, at 30 years old, the first hit would be a LinkedIn profile listing me as the operations director for Clearline Coordinated Care, a massive healthcare network spanning 3 states. I had become something of a legend in the regional logistics world. I was the woman you called when your inventory was bleeding money. I was the person who could walk into a hospital basement that looked like a bomb had gone off in a pharmacy, sniff the air, and tell you exactly why your surgical kits were bottlenecking on the 2nd floor. They called me the Fixer. I did not mind the nickname. It was better than the names Lana used to call me. I had made some changes. The biggest one was on my driver's license. With Margaret's help and a very good lawyer, I legally dropped my father's last name. I was no longer Erica Calder. I was Erica Swanson, taking my mother's maiden name. I told people it was to honor her memory, which was true, but there was a sharper truth underneath. I wanted a name that Lana could not touch. I wanted a name that did not belong to the man who let me walk out into the cold, professionally. I was a Swanson. I was my own island. My personal life had stabilized, too. Luca and I were engaged. We lived in a loft apartment in downtown Columbus that was small but flooded with light. We did not have expensive furniture. Old habits die hard. But we had 52 houseplants and 3 giant whiteboards mounted on the living room wall. Our friends joked that we were the only couple who planned our date nights using flowcharts, but it worked for us. We were not in a rush to get married. We were enjoying the luxury of being boring. We cooked dinner. We watered the ferns. We slept without listening for footsteps in the hallway. It was a peace I had fought hard for, and I guarded it jealously. But my brain never really turned off. In the evenings, after my shift at Clearline was done, I worked on a side project with Margaret. We called it Rootwise Med. It started as a complaint Margaret made over tea one Sunday. She mentioned that small clinics were constantly running out of basic supplies because the big delivery trucks prioritized the major hospitals. They were the last stop on the route, so if the truck ran out or hit traffic, the little guys suffered. I looked at Luca. Luca looked at his laptop, and we started coding. Rootwise Med was a platform designed to optimize delivery routes specifically for small-scale providers. It used an algorithm I wrote to predict inventory needs before the clinic even knew they were low. It was small at first. We had 5 clients and the subscription fee was barely enough to cover the server costs. But it was mine. It was a sandbox where I could test my theories about movement and efficiency. Then came the blizzard of 2024. They called it the storm of the century, which the news channels seemed to say every 2 years. But this one meant it. 2 feet of snow fell on Ohio in 24 hours. The interstate was a parking lot of frozen semi-trucks. Power lines were down. The state declared a level 3 emergency. At Clearline, we were in crisis mode, but the real panic was happening at the Rivergate network, my old employer, which was testing our Rootwise software. They had 3 rural clinics that were critically low on oxygen tanks, and the main delivery fleet was snowed in at the depot 40 miles away. I sat at my kitchen table, surrounded by monitors, Luca feeding me coffee. I pulled up the Rootwise dashboard. The red warning lights were blinking. I saw a pattern the big dispatchers missed. There was a supply of oxygen sitting in a dental surgery center that was closed for the storm, located only 5 miles from the critical clinics. And I saw a fleet of 4-wheel-drive courier jeeps that were usually used for lab samples sitting idle because the labs were closed. I made 3 phone calls. I overrode the standard protocol. I rerouted the couriers to the dental center, had the site manager unlock the doors remotely, loaded the oxygen, and guided them through back roads that my algorithm identified as plowed based on municipal data. It took 4 hours of white-knuckle coordination, but at 7 in the evening, while the main highways were still shut down, the oxygen tanks arrived at the rural clinics. 12 patients with respiratory failure were stabilized. No one died. I collapsed onto the sofa, my brain feeling like fried circuitry. Luca kissed my forehead and told me I was a genius. I told him I was just good at Tetris. 2 days later, the local news station picked up the story. They wanted a human interest angle on the storm. They found out about the rogue logistics operation that saved the clinics. They interviewed me via Zoom. I wore a blazer over my pajamas. I was brief. I hated the camera. It reminded me of Brielle's phone, of the red recording light that had ruined my life. It was just a math problem, I told the reporter, looking away from the lens. We saw a resource in point A and a need in point B. We just found a line between them that wasn't buried in snow. The segment aired on the 6 o'clock news. It was a 3-minute fluff piece. I thought that would be the end of it. I was wrong. The clip was shared on LinkedIn, then on a logistics industry forum. Then it hit Facebook. The headline was catchy. Local woman's app saves lives in blizzard. A week later, I was at work, reviewing a quarterly budget, when my personal email pinged. I didn't recognize the sender immediately. It was a girl named Sarah I had gone to high school with, someone I hadn't spoken to in 12 years. Subject: Is this you? I opened it, feeling a vague sense of dread. Attached was a screenshot of a Facebook post. It was from Lana's profile. I felt the blood drain from my face. I hadn't seen her face in 3 years, but there she was in her profile picture, looking pious and filtered. The post was a link to my news interview. Her caption read, "So incredibly proud of my daughter, Erica. She has been working so hard to save lives at the hospital network. It is moments like this that make all the sacrifices of raising a child worth it. We faced so many struggles to get her through those difficult college years. But God is good, proud mom. My girl healthcare, hero." I read it twice. Then I read the comments. "You did such a good job raising her, Lana. She gets her brains from her dad, but her heart from you. I remember how worried you were about her path. Look at her now." And Lana was replying to every single one. "Thank you. We just tried to give her the best foundation. It was hard work, but love conquers all." I felt physically ill. A wave of nausea rolled through me so strong I had to grab the edge of my desk. She was stealing it. She was stealing my success. She was stealing my survival. The woman who had slashed my hand, called me a burden, and thrown me out into the night with a trash bag of clothes was now using my face to get likes from the church group. She wasn't just lying. She was rewriting history. In her version, she wasn't the villain who exiled me. She was the martyr who sacrificed to get me here. She was co-opting the very resilience she had forced me to build. I closed my laptop. I grabbed my purse. I walked out of the office without telling anyone. I drove straight to Margaret's house. Margaret was in her garden, even though it was winter, checking on her dormant hydrangeas. She saw my car screech into the driveway and dropped her trowel. I marched up to her, shaking, and held out my phone. "Read it," I choked out. Margaret wiped her hands on her apron and took the phone. She read the post. Her face didn't move. She read the comments. Her eyes narrowed. She handed the phone back to me. "I am going to vomit," I said, pacing on the frozen grass. "She is telling people she raised me. She is telling people she sacrificed for me. Margaret, she stole my credit identity. She stole my tuition money. And now she is stealing my victory?" "She is a narcissist, Erica," Margaret said calmly. "This is what they do. They harvest glory." "I can't let her do this," I said. "I have spent 3 years trying to ignore her. I changed my name. I moved cities. I thought if I just succeeded enough, if I got high enough, she couldn't touch me. But she is climbing up the ladder right behind me and taking credit for the view." Margaret looked at me. She didn't offer me tea this time. She didn't tell me to breathe. She looked at me with a gaze that was sharp and assessing. "So," Margaret said, "what are you going to do? Block her?" "I blocked her 3 years ago," I snapped. "This isn't about me seeing it. It is about everyone else seeing it. It is about my dad seeing it and thinking, 'Oh, look, they are all good now. Lana was right. It was just a phase.'" My phone buzzed again. It was another email. This one was from a neighbor I used to babysit for. "Hi, Erica. Saw your mom's post. So amazing. Are you coming to the church picnic this summer? Lana says you're just so busy saving the world you haven't had time to visit, but we'd love to see you." I stared at the screen. "She is spinning a web," I whispered. "She is painting me as the busy, successful, but slightly neglectful daughter, and herself as the patient, proud mother waiting at home. She is insulating herself. If I ever try to tell the truth now, I look like an ungrateful brat attacking a saint." I looked at Margaret. The sadness that usually lived in my chest when I thought about my family was gone. In its place was something hotter, something harder. It was the same feeling I had when I looked at a disorganized warehouse. I saw a broken system. I saw a corrupt workflow. And I knew, with absolute certainty, that I could not let it continue. "I am done," I said. My voice was steady now. "Done with what?" Margaret asked. "I am done being the bigger person," I said. "I am done hiding in my success. She wants to claim me? Fine, she can have me. But she is going to get the whole package, not just the director of operations. She is going to get the girl with the receipts." Margaret smiled. It was a small, dangerous smile. "You are not going to just comment on the post, are you?" "No," I said. "Comments can be deleted. Blocks can be ignored. I need to do something she can't edit." I thought about the suitcase, the one Margaret had brought me that night. It was still in the back of my closet, filled with the files we had meticulously organized, the police report I never filed, the credit card statements with her signature, the timeline. I had kept it as a shield, thinking I might need it if she ever tried to sue me or hurt my credit again, but a shield can also be a battering ram if you run fast enough. "I need to go back," I said. "Not to visit, to clarify." Margaret nodded. She reached into her pocket and pulled out her car keys. "You know, I have been keeping a file too. Just a few things I noticed over the years. Supplemental data." "You knew this day would come," I said. "I hoped it wouldn't," Margaret replied. "But I prepared for it. That is logistics, isn't it?" I looked at my engagement ring, then at the phone where Lana's fake praise was racking up likes. "She built a house of cards on my back," I said, "and she just invited everyone to come look at it." I took a deep breath of the cold winter air. "I think it is time I blew it down." The coffee shop was located just across the county line, a safe neutral zone between my new life and the radioactive fallout of my old one. I sat in a corner booth, nursing a black coffee, watching the door. When Sarah walked in, she looked over her shoulder twice, as if she were meeting a drug dealer instead of her old high school lab partner. Sarah had been one of the few people from Maple Ridge who had not immediately blocked me when Lana started her smear campaign 3 years ago. She was messy. She loved drama, but she was honest. She slid into the booth, unwinding a thick scarf. She looked at me, really looked at me, taking in the blazer, the diamond engagement ring, the way I held my shoulders back. "You look expensive," Sarah said, by way of greeting. "I look employed," I corrected. "Thanks for meeting me. Sarah, I know it is weird." "Weird?" Sarah laughed, a dry, sharp sound. "Erica, your stepmother has turned you into a folk legend at the First Baptist Church. I had to see the myth in the flesh." I braced myself. "What is she saying?" Sarah leaned in, lowering her voice. "Okay, so the narrative has evolved. Last year, you were the prodigal daughter who lost her way. But ever since that news report came out about you saving the clinics during the blizzard, now you are the miracle child she sacrificed everything for." I felt the familiar burn of acid in my throat. "Sacrificed?" "Oh, yeah," Sarah said, her eyes widening. "Lana tells everyone that when your dad was working away, she took on 2 jobs, cleaning houses and some retail gig, just to pay for your specialized logistics degree. She says she sold her jewelry to keep you in school. She cries when she tells it. She says, 'I did not care if my hands bled, as long as Erica could fly.'" My grip on the coffee cup tightened until my knuckles turned white. "I paid for my own school," I said, my voice deadly quiet. "I worked the night shift at a warehouse. She charged me rent to live in my own childhood bedroom. She stole my identity to buy designer purses." Sarah winced. "I believe you. I mean, I see Brielle driving a brand new convertible while your dad is still driving that truck from 2015. The math never added up. But Erica, they love her. She is the chair of the charity committee. Brielle is leading the youth choir. They are the royal family of Maple Ridge." She hesitated, then pulled up a photo on her phone. "And she is using your name to fundraise. Look." It was a flyer for a church fundraiser, the Erica Calder Scholarship for Underprivileged Youth, administered by Lana Calder. "She is collecting money," I whispered, using my name. "And keeping it, probably," Sarah muttered. "Look, I just thought you should know. She is rewriting your whole life, and your dad. He just stands there and nods. He looks tired. Erica, really tired." I drove home in a fugue state. I had spent 3 years building a fortress of success, thinking it would keep me safe. I thought that if I just outran them, their lies would fade. But I had underestimated Lana. She was not just a liar, she was a parasite. She had latched onto my success and was feeding off it to bloat her own reputation. When I walked into the apartment, Margaret was sitting at the kitchen island with Luca. They were looking at a spread of documents. Margaret took one look at my face and stood up. "What happened?" she asked. I told them. I told them about the scholarship. I told them about the 2 jobs Lana never worked. "I want to sue her," I said. "I want to sue her for defamation. I want to sue her for fraud. I want to burn it down." "Good," Margaret said. "But we do not sue with anger. We sue with paper." The next morning, we met with a consumer protection lawyer named Mr. Vance. He was a small man with a messy office, but Margaret swore he was a shark in a cheap suit. He listened to my story, scribbling on a yellow pad. When I finished, he tapped his pen against his desk. "The statute of limitations is tricky," he said. "For the credit card fraud, if it happened more than 7 years ago, we might be out of luck criminally. But civilly, if you can prove that she concealed the fraud, the clock might start from when you discovered it. The scholarship using your name without consent? That is fraud and misappropriation of likeness. That is fresh." He looked at me over his spectacles. "But you need proof, hard proof. Not just, he said, she said. Lana Calder sounds like a professional manipulator. She will have an explanation for everything. She will say you gave her permission. She will say the money was a gift." I slumped in my chair. I threw out most of the letters. I was just trying to survive back then. I didn't keep a filing cabinet. Margaret cleared her throat. She reached down and lifted a battered gray suitcase onto the lawyer's desk. It was the suitcase, the one she had brought to the curb that night. "I did," Margaret said. I looked at her. "What?" Margaret unzipped the suitcase. It wasn't full of clothes anymore. It was full of manila folders, arranged by year and color-coded. "Erica," Margaret said gently, "I have been a nurse for 30 years. I know that wounds heal, but legal cases live forever if you preserve the evidence. I kept everything." She opened the first folder. "Here's the credit report I pulled the day after you moved in with us, showing the unauthorized accounts. Here are the dispute letters we sent, and the rejection letters where the bank said the family connection made it a civil matter. Here are the photos of your hand, taken that night, dated and time-stamped. Here is the urgent care report from when I glued the cut shut." She pulled out another folder, a thicker one. "Here are the screenshots of every text message she sent you for the first 6 months. The threats, the gaslighting, the demands for money. I printed them out because I knew you would delete them to stop the pain." I stared at the pile. It was a museum of my trauma. But looking at it now, in the lawyer's office, it didn't look like pain. It looked like ammunition. "Mr. Vance picked up the stack of text logs. He started to read, his eyebrows climbing higher and higher. "These are compelling. If you tell your father about the credit card, I will make sure he never speaks to you again. That is extortion." "There is more," Margaret said. She looked at me. "Erica, you need to see the timeline." We went back to my apartment. I felt a strange buzzing in my head, the same feeling I got when I was looking at a complex logistics problem. The emotion was draining away, replaced by cold, hard analysis. I cleared the wall in the living room. I took down the art. I taped up a long roll of butcher paper. "We are going to map it," I said. "Luca, get the markers." For the next 6 hours, we built the timeline. On top, the dad timeline. When he left for North Dakota, when he sent checks, when he came home for visits. Below that, the Lana timeline. When she bought the car, when she renovated the kitchen, when she opened the credit cards in my name. And at the bottom, the truth timeline, the dates of the loans, the dates of the threats. I stepped back and looked at the wall. It was a masterpiece of dysfunction. You could see the pattern visually. Every time Dad sent a large check, Lana spent it within 3 days, then opened a new line of credit in my name to cover the household bills she had neglected. It was a Ponzi scheme, and I was the investor who got left holding the bag. But there was a gap. I pointed to a date 3 years ago, right after Dad had taken the job out of state. "Look at this," I said. There is a notary charge on the joint account. $200, but they didn't buy a car. They didn't sign a loan that I know of. What did they notarize? Margaret walked over to the suitcase. She pulled out a blue folder I hadn't seen before. I did some digging at the county recorder's office last week, she said. I had a hunch. She handed me a document. It was a property deed. What is this? I asked. It is a quitclaim deed, Margaret said. Signed by your father, transferring the family home from Robert Swanson and Mary Swanson, your late mother, to Robert Swanson and Lana Calder, with rights of survivorship. I stared at the paper. So, they are married. That makes sense. Read the date, Margaret said. I looked. It was dated 3 days after Dad left for North Dakota, but the signature... He wasn't there, I whispered. He was 1,200 miles away. He couldn't have signed this in front of a notary in Maple Ridge. It is a forgery, Luca said, looking over my shoulder. Or she mailed it to him and lied about what it was. It gets worse, Margaret said. She reached into the suitcase again and pulled out an old yellowed envelope. Erica, do you have a copy of your mother's will? I shook my head. I was 14 when she died. Dad handled everything. I found this in the public probate records, Margaret said. Your mother's will was very specific. She left her half of the house to you, in a trust, to be transferred when you turned 25. Your father had a life estate, meaning he could live there, but he couldn't sell it or give it away without your signature. The room went silent. The air felt sucked out of the space. She stole my inheritance, I said, my voice trembling. It wasn't just the credit cards. She stole my mother's half of the house. I looked at the deed again. There was a signature on the line for Erica Swanson, beneficiary. It was a scrawl, a bad forgery. I didn't sign this, I said. I know, Margaret said, and that makes this document null and void, and it makes Lana guilty of grand larceny and deed fraud. I walked to the window. I looked out at the city lights. I felt a cold, hard rage settling in my chest. This wasn't just about money anymore. This was about erasure. Lana had tried to erase my mother's legacy. She had tried to erase my future. And now she was using my name to build a statue to herself. I turned back to the room. I need to talk to Dad. He won't believe you over the phone, Luca said. He never has. I know, I said. I sat down at my computer. I need to see him. I opened Facebook. I had a burner account I used to monitor industry trends, but I used it now to search for Maple Ridge events. And there it was. Robert's 60th Jubilee, a celebration of life, family, and faith. It was scheduled for this Saturday, at the house. The invitation was public. It listed the itinerary, a barbecue, a speech by Lana, and a special dedication of the Erica Calder Scholarship. She was going to launch the fraudulent scholarship at my father's birthday party. I laughed. It was a dark, humorless sound. She is throwing a party, I said. She invited the whole town, the neighbors, the church, the donors. Erica, Margaret said warningly, what are you thinking? I am thinking that she loves an audience, I said. She relies on the audience. She relies on the fact that everyone is too polite to make a scene. She relies on the fact that I ran away. I stood up and walked to the suitcase. I ran my hand over the worn gray fabric. We are not going to sue her quietly, I said. We are going to the party. Erica, Luca said, that is a war zone. No, I corrected him. It is a crime scene, and we are bringing the evidence. I looked at Margaret. Can I borrow the suitcase? One last time? Margaret stood up. She walked over to me and zipped the suitcase shut. The sound was like a zipper closing on a body bag. You are not borrowing it, she said. I am carrying it. You are the CEO now. Erica, you don't carry the luggage. You deliver the verdict. I will carry the proof. I hesitated. Is this just revenge? Am I just doing this to hurt her? Margaret placed her hands on my face. Her thumbs brushed away a tear I hadn't realized had fallen. Listen to me, she said fiercely. Revenge is slashing tires. Revenge is petty. This is a correction. She is using your name to steal from people. She is erasing your mother's will. Stopping her isn't vengeance. It is public safety. You are closing the door. Erica, you are making sure she never drags you, or anyone else, into the mud again. I looked at the timeline on the wall. I looked at the forged deed. I looked at the fraudulent scholarship flyer. Okay, I said. We go? I picked up my phone and clicked going on the event page. I turned to Luca. Do we have a portable projector? The kind we use for client demos? Luca grinned, a sharp, wolfish expression I had never seen on him before. I have the 4K one. It is bright enough to see in daylight. Pack it, I said. If she wants to tell a story about our family, let's help her tell the whole truth. I looked at the suitcase one last time. It looked innocuous sitting there on the carpet, just a piece of luggage. But inside, it held the power to shatter a decade of lies. Saturday, I said. We are going home. I sat at my kitchen island, the glow of my laptop screen illuminating the dark room. On the screen was the Eventbrite page for Robert Calder's 60th Jubilee. The background was a stock photo of a sunset over a wheat field, overlaid with curly gold script. The guest list was public. I scrolled through the names. My aunts, uncles, cousins I had not seen in 3 years. Neighbors who had watched me grow up and then watched me disappear without asking why. The cursor hovered over the RSVP button. For a moment, my heart did that familiar, terrified stutter it used to do when I heard Lana's car pull into the driveway. But I placed my hand flat on the cool granite counter. I breathed in. I breathed out. I was not that girl anymore. I was Erica Swanson, operations director. I managed crises for a living. This was just another crisis. I clicked yes. A text box appeared asking for the name of the attendee. I typed Erica Swanson, not Calder, Swanson. I hit send. The confirmation email pinged in my inbox immediately. You are going. Okay, I said to the empty room. I am going. The next 48 hours were not spent in emotional turmoil. They were spent in rehearsal. If you want to control a chaotic environment, you have to simulate the variables. That is Logistics 101. Luca and I turned our living room into a theater of potential disasters. We pushed the coffee table aside. Luca, usually the gentlest soul I knew, took on the role of the opposition. Okay, scenario 1, Luca said, crossing his arms and adopting a defensive posture. I am your dad. I refuse to look at the papers. I say this is not the time or the place. I stood straight, shoulders back, my hands clasped loosely in front of me. I understand this is a celebration, Robert, but you signed a legal document transferring my mother's property 3 days after you left the state. If you do not want to discuss why your signature was forged, we can discuss it with the police officer I have on speed dial. Too aggressive, Margaret said from the armchair. She was acting as the director. He will shut down. He will feel attacked. Pivot to confusion. Make him curious. I nodded. Okay, try again. Robert, I am not here to ruin your party. I am here because there is a signature on a deed that claims to be yours, dated when you were in North Dakota. I need you to verify if you signed it, because if you did not, someone in this house committed a felony against you. Better, Margaret said. Frame him as the victim, not the accomplice. It lowers his defenses. Scenario 2, Luca said, shifting his weight and pitching his voice high and shrill. I am Lana. I start crying. I scream that you are ruining the family. I faint. I step over you, I said instantly. Luca laughed, breaking character. Okay, fair, but seriously. If she creates a scene, I said. I do not engage. I turn to the audience. I speak to the witnesses. I say, I am sorry for the disruption, but the truth is often loud. No, that sounds too dramatic. Keep it factual, Margaret advised. If she screams, you get quieter. Contrast is your friend. If she is hysterical, you are ice. If she is the storm, you are the lighthouse. We practiced for hours. We practiced for Brielle recording me with her phone. I would look directly into the lens and state the date and time. We practiced for the neighbors intervening. I would thank them for their concern and hand them a copy of the public court records. While we rehearsed, Margaret organized the payload. The gray suitcase sat on the dining table, open and waiting. Margaret treated it like a surgical tray. Every document was placed in a specific order, tabbed and highlighted. "Top layer," Margaret said, pointing to a red folder. "The hook, the credit card statements showing the luxury purchases made while you were supposedly stealing from the family. This disproves the character assassination." "Middle layer," she continued, touching a blue folder. "The leverage, the original will of your mother, Mary Swanson, which I retrieved from the county archives, and the quitclaim deed with the forged signatures. This proves the theft of the asset." "Bottom layer," she tapped a thick black binder. "The nuclear option, the full timeline of financial abuse, the text logs of the extortion, and the drafted civil lawsuit for identity theft, ready to be filed on Monday morning." She looked at me. "We do not open the black binder unless we have to. We want them to settle. We want them to sign the corrective deeds. But if they want war, the black binder is the nuke." I looked at the stack of paper. It was heavy. It was the weight of 10 years of silence, finally given a voice. "What about the law?" I asked. "I spoke to Mr. Vance," Margaret said. "He will be available via video call from 2 to 5 on Saturday. If the police are called, or if your father agrees to sign the reversal papers, Vance will be on the screen to witness and advise." "And the notary?" "I hired a mobile notary service," I said. "Her name is Brenda. She will be parked in a sedan 2 blocks away from the house, if Dad agrees to sign the deed back to the trust. I text her, and she walks over. I am not leaving that house with a promise. Margaret, I am leaving with a legally binding signature." The night before the party, I couldn't sleep. The adrenaline was humming in my veins, cold and sharp. I needed to ground myself. I grabbed my keys and drove. I didn't drive to the grocery store. I drove to the old Greyhound bus station on the west side of town. It was a grim place. The fluorescent lights buzzed and flickered. The air smelled of diesel exhaust and stale cigarettes. Years ago, I had sat on a bench here after a shift, counting quarters, wondering if I should just buy a ticket to anywhere and disappear. I sat on that same bench now. I was wearing a cashmere sweater and driving a car that was paid off. I looked at the cracked pavement where I used to stare at my worn-out sneakers. I needed to remember the fear. I needed to remember how small I felt when Lana held all the cards. Because tomorrow, I needed to channel that girl. Not to be her again, but to fight for her. I closed my eyes and practiced my lines. Not the ones for the scenarios, but the ones for me. "I am not asking you to love me," I whispered to the empty bus bay. "I am asking you to read this. I am not a daughter begging for scraps. I am a creditor coming to collect. I do not need your forgiveness. I need your signature." I sat there until my breathing slowed. I established my boundaries. I promised myself that I would not cry. Tears were for people who felt helpless. I was not helpless. I would not beg. Begging was for people who needed something they didn't have. I had the truth. That was enough. I checked my phone one last time before driving home. I opened Facebook. Lana had posted an hour ago. It was a photo of a massive sheet cake. It was frosted in blue and gold. The icing read, "Calder Strong. Faith, family, forgiveness." The caption was a masterpiece of manipulation. "Tomorrow we celebrate 60 years of our rock, Robert. In a world that tries to tear families apart, we choose to forgive and hold on tight. Can't wait to see everyone. Blessed family first." I read the word forgiveness and let out a short, dry laugh. It echoed in the empty car. Lana used forgiveness like a weapon. To her, forgiveness meant silence. It meant accepting her abuse without complaint, so she didn't have to feel uncomfortable. She was preemptively forgiving me for the crime of being her victim. "You want forgiveness, Lana," I said to the screen. "I will bring you a subpoena. That is how the legal system forgives." I drove home. The city lights blurred past me. I felt ready. The next morning, The apartment was quiet. The mood was not festive. It felt like the locker room before a championship game, or perhaps the staging area before a raid. Luca was pacing, checking his tie in the mirror. He looked handsome, but pale. "I am worried, Erica," he admitted, stopping to look at me. "I am worried this is going to hurt you, even if we win, even if we prove everything. Watching your dad realize he was a pawn, that is going to break something inside you." I was putting on my earrings, small, simple pearls, my mother's pearls. "The break happened a long time ago. Luca," I said, meeting his eyes in the mirror. "The bone didn't set right. It has been crooked and aching for 3 years. Today, we are just re-breaking it so it can heal straight. It is going to hurt, yes, but it is a necessary pain." "I just don't want you to expect a hug," he said softly. "I don't want you to hope that he wakes up and becomes the dad you wanted." "I don't," I said. "I buried that hope. Today isn't about getting my dad back. It is about getting my name back." Margaret walked out of her bedroom. She was wearing a navy blue blazer and slacks. She looked formidable. She looked like the head nurse who ran the trauma unit with an iron fist. She was carrying the suitcase. She set it down by the door. Then, she did something that made my throat tight. She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, sealed package of sterile gauze and a roll of medical tape. She placed them on top of the suitcase, right over the handle. "What is that for?" Luca asked. "A reminder," Margaret said, looking at me. "The last time we saw them, you were bleeding, and I had to patch you up. Today, we are walking and fully healed, but I'm bringing the kit just in case. I am always the first responder. Erica, before I am the witness, before I am the strategist, I am the one who stops the bleeding. Remember that." I touched the gauze. It was a talisman. It reminded me that I had a mother figure in the room. She just didn't share my DNA. "Let's go," I said. The drive to Maple Ridge took 45 minutes. We didn't play music. The car was filled with the low, rhythmic hum of the tires on the highway and the robotic voice of the GPS giving directions. "In 2 miles. Take exit 4B. It felt grounded, real. This wasn't a movie. There was no swelling orchestra. It was just 3 people in a Honda Civic driving to the suburbs to dismantle a lie. As we exited the highway and turned onto the familiar streets of my childhood, I felt a physical weight settle on my chest. The trees were taller. The corner store had been repainted, but the geography of the trauma was identical. There was the park where I used to hide when Lana was in a mood. There was the intersection where Dad taught me to drive. We turned onto Oak Street. The house was there. It looked different. They had painted the shutters black. There was a new landscaping feature in the front yard. Lana's touch, no doubt. The driveway was full of cars. Balloons tied to the mailbox bobbed in the wind. Happy 60th. I saw my aunt's minivan. I saw the pastor's sedan. I pulled the car up to the curb, 3 houses down, just as we had planned. I put the car in park. I looked at the house. For years, that structure had appeared in my nightmares. It was a monster with windows for eyes. But sitting here now, next to Luca, with Margaret in the back seat, it just looked small. It was just wood and brick and siding. It was a house with a mortgage and a leaky gutter. It wasn't a monster. It was just a building where bad things had happened. I turned off the ignition. "Okay," Luca said, his hand finding mine. "We are here." Margaret leaned forward from the back seat. "Check your phone. Is the notary in position?" I checked. A text from Brenda. "Parked on Elm, waiting for your signal." "Notary is set," I said. "Lawyer is online." I looked at the 2 of them, my team, my real family. "You know," I said, my voice steady, "I used to be terrified of walking up that driveway. I used to feel like I was trespassing." I unbuckled my seatbelt. But looking at it now, I realize something. They are the trespassers. They are living in a house paid for by my mother's legacy, throwing a party funded by my stolen credit, celebrating a reputation built on my name. I opened the car door. The air smelled of charcoal smoke and cut grass. Dying is easy, I murmured, quoting a line from a play I had read once. Living is harder. I looked back at Luca and Margaret. Whatever happens in that backyard, I said quietly. Whatever lies they tell, whatever names they call me, I already know where my home is. It is in this car. It is in the apartment with the plants. It is with you. Margaret nodded, her eyes fierce. She picked up the suitcase. The wheels hit the pavement with a solid thud. Then let's go introduce them to the truth, she said. We walked up the sidewalk, the sound of our footsteps syncing up. I smoothed the front of my blazer. I checked the engagement ring on my finger. I took a deep breath. And then, I walked into the lion's den, not as a lamb, but as the lion tamer. The backyard gate unlatched with a metallic click that seemed to echo louder than the music. I stepped into the space that used to be my sanctuary. The yard had been transformed. Strings of Edison bulbs draped from the oak trees, casting a warm golden glow over the white tablecloths. A massive banner stretched across the back porch, reading Happy 60th, Robert, our rock, in glittering blue letters. The air smelled of charcoal smoke and expensive cologne. There were at least 50 people there. Cousins I had not seen since I was a teenager holding red Solo cups. Neighbors who used to wave to me while I mowed the lawn. They were laughing, eating, and celebrating the curated image of the Calder family. Then, someone saw me. It started as a ripple near the gate. A hush spread through the crowd like a wave. The laughter died out. The music seemed to grow uncomfortably loud in the sudden silence. I heard a whisper from Mrs. Gable, the neighbor to the left. Is that her? Is that the girl from the news? It is Erica, someone else murmured. She looks different. I did look different. I was not the girl in the hoodie anymore. I was wearing a tailored black suit that cost more than the car I left in 3 years ago. I stood tall, flanked by Luca on my left and Margaret on my right. Lana was the first to react. She was standing near the punch bowl, holding court. When she saw me, her eyes widened in genuine shock. But her recovery was instantaneous. The mask slammed into place. She rushed forward, her arms wide, a dazzling, frantic smile plastered on her face. "Erica!" she cried out, her voice pitching up to a theatrical level of delight. "Oh, look at you! Everyone, look! My daughter made it! I knew you would come. I am just so proud of you." She reached out to hug me, aiming for an embrace that would signal to everyone that we were close, that the Facebook posts were real. I took one precise step backward. Lana's arms closed on empty air. She stumbled slightly, her smile faltering. "Stop," I said. I did not yell. I spoke in a calm, projected voice that carried across the silent yard. "From the night you threw a duffel bag at me and chased me off this property, we have not spoken a single word. Let us start the conversation from that point." The silence in the yard deepened. It was heavy and suffocating. The back door opened, and my father walked out. He was holding a platter of burgers. He looked older. His hair was completely gray now, and his shoulders were stooped, as if the weight of the house was pressing him down. He froze when he saw me. The platter tilted dangerously in his hands before he set it down on a side table. His eyes filled with a complicated mix of shock, hope, and fear. "Erica?" he breathed. He took a step toward me, his hands reaching out instinctively. "You came." He looked like he wanted to hug me. He looked like he wanted to pretend the last 3 years had just been a long vacation. I held up a hand, palm out. "Not yet, Dad." Behind me, Margaret stepped forward. She was holding the gray suitcase. With a deliberate, heavy motion, she swung it forward and set it down on the manicured grass right next to the gift table. Thud. The sound of the heavy luggage hitting the ground was final. It sounded like a gavel. Lana looked at the suitcase, then at the crowd. She sensed the danger immediately. She laughed, a high, brittle sound. "Oh, honey," she said, waving her hand dismissively. "This is a party. There are children here. If you are planning some sort of dramatic scene or a prank, let us just go inside and—" "I am not here for a prank," I cut her off. My voice was sharp, slicing through her deflection. And I am not going inside where you can twist the story. I came to make a clarification. You have been telling everyone that I'm dangerous. You told them I was unstable. You told them I needed to be handled. I looked at the crowd. I saw Sarah standing by the fence, watching with wide eyes. I decided that this time, I continued, I would not let you tell the story alone. I brought witnesses. I crouched down and unzipped the suitcase. The sound of the zipper was loud in the quiet yard. I flipped the lid open. There were no clothes inside. There were no shoes. The suitcase was packed with rows of color-coded file folders, standing upright, organized with military precision. A murmur went through the crowd. They realized instantly that this was not an emotional outburst. This was a legal proceeding. I stood up, holding a red folder. "Dad," I said, turning to him, "you believe I abandoned you. You believe I refused to help with the bills. You believe I stole from you." I opened the folder and pulled out a spreadsheet with attached bank statements. "This is a record of the credit card opened in my name 3 months before you left for North Dakota," I said, handing the paper to him. "The signature is a forgery. The charges are for luxury clothing, a spa weekend, and high-end electronics. The total debt was $10,000. I paid it off working night shifts so your credit score would not be ruined." Lana lunged forward. "That is a lie. She gave me permission. She wanted to help her sister." "I have the affidavit from the bank noting the fraud report," Margaret said, her voice cool and professional. "And I have the IP address logs showing the application was submitted from this house while Erica was at work." My father looked at the paper. His hands were shaking. "Lana," he whispered, "you told me she was spending money on parties." I did not give him time to process. I reached into the suitcase and pulled out the blue folder. "But money is just money," I said. "You can earn money back. This is about what you cannot replace." I pulled out a photocopy of an old document and held it up. "This is Mom's original will," I said. "Mary Swanson. She left her half of this house to me, in a trust, effective when I turned 25. It was her legacy. It was the only thing she had to give me." I pulled out a second document, the quitclaim deed. "And this," I said, my voice trembling slightly with suppressed rage, "is the deed transferring the house entirely to you and Lana. It is dated 3 days after you left for the pipeline job. It has a signature that claims to be mine, and it has a signature that claims to be yours." I walked over and handed it to him. "Look at the date. Dad, you were 1,200 miles away in a snowstorm. How did you sign this in front of a notary in Maple Ridge?" Lana looked frantic. She looked at the neighbors, her smile gone, replaced by the cornered look of a trapped animal. "We were in a crisis," she shouted. "The market was crashing. We had to refinance to save the house. You were so stressed. Robert, I handled it. I did it to protect us. It was just paperwork." "It is a felony," Margaret stated. "It is called deed fraud and grand larceny." The whispers in the yard were getting louder. "She stole the house?" "Robert, she used that girl's name like an ATM. I saw Brielle standing on the back porch. She was holding her phone, but she was not recording. Her face was pale. She lowered the phone and stepped back into the shadows. My father looked up from the deed. His face was gray. He looked at the woman he had married, the woman he had defended for 10 years. "You told me Erica signed it," he said, his voice cracking. "You told me she wanted us to have the security." "She is ungrateful," Lana shrieked, pointing a shaking finger at me. "After everything I did, I raised her, I cleaned up after her, and this is how she repays me? By ruining your birthday?" "Did you hit her?" The question came from my father. It was quiet, barely a whisper, but it stopped everything. He looked at me. He looked at the scar on my hand, visible as I held the papers. "That night," Dad said, his voice trembling, "when she left, you told me she attacked you. You told me she was violent. Did you hit her, Lana?" Lana gasped. She clutched her chest. "She attacked me! She threw a glass. Brielle has the video. She was crazy. Robert, I was defending myself." "Show the video," I said. Lana froze. If the video shows me attacking you, I said, show it to them. Show it to the police. Lana stammered. I deleted it. To protect you, Erica, because I loved you. Margaret stepped forward. She held up a small USB drive. You deleted it from your phone, Margaret said. But Brielle backed it up to the family cloud account, and since Erica was paying the bill for that account, she had access. Margaret looked at the crowd. The video shows Lana Calder slapping Erica Swanson across the face, while Erica's hands were at her sides. It shows Lana pushing her into a broken wine glass. It shows a 19-year-old girl bleeding on the floor while her stepmother laughs. The sound of disgust from the crowd was audible. It was a collective intake of breath. The image of the saintly, sacrificing mother evaporated instantly, leaving only the ugly truth exposed in the afternoon sun. Lana looked around. She saw the faces of her friends, her church members. They were not looking at her with admiration anymore. They were looking at her with horror. You are all traitors, Lana hissed. You do not know what it is like. You do not know how hard it is to deal with a difficult child. I was not difficult, I said softly. I was just in the way. I walked to the suitcase one last time. I pulled out 2 final documents. I walked up to my father. He was weeping now, silent tears tracking through the deep lines of his face. I am not sending you to jail, Dad, I said. And I am not calling the police on her today. Though I just want to be free. I placed the papers on the table next to his birthday cake. This is a correction deed, I said. It restores Mom's half of the house to the trust, and this is a debt release form, acknowledging that the loans taken out in my name are her responsibility, not mine. I pointed to the street. I have a notary waiting 2 blocks away. I can text her. She can be here in 3 minutes. You sign these, and I walk away with my name clean. You do not sign. And Mr. Vance files the lawsuit on Monday morning. Dad looked at Lana. She was sobbing now. A performative, wailing cry, tugging on his sleeve. Robert, do not let her do this. She is destroying us. My father pulled his arm away from her. He looked at her with eyes that were suddenly very clear and very cold. She did not destroy us, he said. We did. He looked at me. Call the notary. I texted Brenda. 3 minutes later, she walked into the yard, looking professional and out of place in her gray suit. Dad signed. He signed the deed. He signed the debt release. He did not look at Lana while he did it. His hand shook, but the signature was firm. When he put the pen down, he looked at me. He looked like a man who had just woken up in a burning house. Erica, he choked out. I failed you. I failed your mother. You did, I said. I did not offer him comfort. I offered him the truth. You chose not to see me because it was easier to see what she wanted you to see. That is the difference. I zipped up the suitcase. It felt lighter now. Thank you all for witnessing this, I said to the crowd. I turned to leave. Luca took my hand. Margaret picked up the suitcase. As we reached the gate, my father called out, Erica! I stopped. I turned halfway back. He swallowed hard. Is there any chance? Can we fix this? I looked at him. I looked at Lana, who was sitting on a lawn chair, weeping into her hands while the neighbors awkwardly moved away from her. Maybe, I said, but not today, and not here. I looked him in the eye. If you want to build something with me, Dad, you have to walk away from the lies. You have to come to my house. You have to knock on my door. And you have to tell the story exactly how it happened. I turned and walked out the gate. We walked back to the car in silence. The sun was setting, casting long shadows down the street. I got into the passenger seat. Margaret put the suitcase in the trunk. As we drove away, I looked down at my feet. The suitcase was no longer the symbol of my eviction. It was no longer a bag of dirty laundry and shame. It was a toolkit. It was a weapon of truth. Voiceover. My stepmother beat me while my dad was away. My boyfriend's mom showed up with a suitcase and taught me how to pack my shame into evidence. Justice is not about humiliating the people who hurt you. Justice is refusing to let their distorted version of you be the only one that exists. I did not just win a lawsuit, I won my name back. Erica speaks directly to the audience. Have you ever had your own suitcase moment? A moment where someone showed up for you when you had nothing? Or a moment where you finally decided to pack up the truth and stand your ground? I want to know. Leave the name of the city where you are listening to this story in the comments below. Because somewhere, right now, there is a girl standing on a porch with a trash bag in her hand, and she needs to know this. If they kick you out of the house, that is not the end of the story. That is just the wrong address. Thank you for listening. If this story resonated with you, please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories, like this video, and hit that hype button to help this story reach someone who might need to hear it today. See you in the next one.